All right, everybody, welcome to Positive Choices Healthy Kids. It's so great to see all of you. We're so glad you could finally join us for this program. I'm Officer Wes Bartosik, and I am currently the School Resource Officer here at Madison Middle School.
I'm Officer Fedorowicz. I am the School Resource Officer over at Hillcrest. I also cover Middlebrook Elementary School, Booth Hill Elementary School, and Daniels Farm Elementary School.
And yes, I failed to mention that while I'm here at Madison, I also help out in the elementary schools as well. You might see me at Jane Ryan, at Tashua, and also at Frenchtown. So what is an SRO? What is a school resource officer? Maybe you guys have never heard that term before. Basically, as you can see, Brian and I are full uniformed police officers with the Trumbull Police Department, but we are assigned to the schools on a permanent basis. Every day we report to the schools, and we kind of are just a friendly, familiar face. We help out as often as we can. What are some of the other things that we do, Brian?
Well, really just school resource officer itself. We're there for a tool for you guys to utilize if you ever need us. If you have any questions at all, whether it's educational or maybe something at home that's bothering you and you don't feel comfortable maybe talking to a teacher about it, you can come and talk to us anytime. We're open to any questions and we'll answer it as best we can.
It's about kind of building that partnership, about building a relationship between you guys and having a familiar, trusted face, somebody in the building that could help you out should you ever have a problem. Now, the reason that you guys are seeing us here on camera today is that, this year's been a little different. It's been a little tricky, it's been a little challenging with everything that's been expected of you guys. Now, in the past, we've always done a program called the DARE program in 5th grade, where myself and other DARE instructor officers will come in and we actually do classroom lessons together. It's something that I love doing. It's one of my favorite things about being an SRO. But unfortunately, we kind of missed out on that this year due to the pandemic and all of our restrictions. So Officer Brian and I were kind of sitting around and we were trying to think of a way of how could we better get to know you guys as 5th graders while even though we're not able to do the DARE program. Well, fortunately, Mrs. McGarry from Teapot is a good friend of ours and somebody that we work with a lot. And together, we work together to come up with this idea, this project, to be able to give you guys something to do, something to hopefully gain a little bit of our knowledge and skill sets and watch at home with whoever's at home with you guys now. So we are going to be doing a series of lessons talking about some of the concepts from DARE and trying to give you guys a little bit of a knowledge to prepare you for the next transition, getting you guys ready. What do you think, Officer Brian? Is it jumping from elementary school to middle school? Do you think do you remember it was a tough transition for you?
I do. I remember I didn't even fall asleep the day before 6th grade. I was a little nervous, but there's nothing to feel nervous about. It's just another step in the process of growing up. I loved middle school. I had a great time. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to meet a lot more friends. I wish I could go back, really, but I hope this video and all the videos we're going to do really help you and educate you with everything you need and prepare yourself for middle school.
And I think a big part of that too is, it might seem a little intimidating, but there are some really cool things. And more importantly, you guys are going to be going to class every day with kids from other schools that you may not have met before, but you're going to be able to build some awesome relationships. But with that comes some unique challenges. You have to remember that now, as a middle schooler, you may find yourself being exposed to certain things or certain situations that you've never had to deal with before. And you might be faced with some things that maybe you shouldn't do or you don't want it to be any a part of. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit more. So, glad to see you all. We're going to get started in just a minute with a little bit more today in our first lesson. So one of the first things that we're going to be talking about today is responsibility. And most importantly, making responsible choices or making responsible decisions. So Officer Brian, what does being responsible mean to you?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind, Wes, is to do the right thing when, maybe no one else is watching. Well, middle school, you're going to have a little bit more leeway, and we really want you to do the right thing all the time. How about you, Wes?
I think a big part of it too is other people trusting in you. When other people trust in you to make the right decisions and they know they don't have to worry about it or get concerned about it, that means that you are really living up to that being responsible or being a responsible individual. But you know, responsibility comes in a lot of different ways. Like I know, like me, you probably had a lot of things that you were responsible for doing growing up. Like, what were your things around the house that you had to do?
Well, always had to make your bed, clean the bathroom, do laundry, take out the garbage. And maybe some of you guys at home, I didn't have a dog growing up, but maybe taking the dog out for a walk. How about you, Wes?
Kind of the same thing. A lot of the same things. You know, basically just cleaning up after myself and making sure that the house wasn't any more of a pigsty than it already was. But, you know, that's okay too. But it's those small things that we can do every day that help us become more responsible individuals, and also help people build that trust in us to make sure we do the right thing. But you know, like I mentioned before, coming into middle school and coming into that, that next phase of life comes with some unique challenges. And in order to do that, in order to be responsible and to make responsible decisions, you guys got to be prepared. You got to be prepared and you got to be ready. And to do that, they're going to need some information.
You most certainly will.
We got to coach them up, Officer Brian.
We do.
All right.
What's a drug?
Are all drugs bad?
Should I never take a drug?
What are common forms of drugs all around us?
All right, so one of the big things about DARE, and again, the grown-ups in your life may remember DARE as something very different. I know when I was a kid growing up, I had a DARE officer, and it was mostly about drugs. Now, drugs isn't the whole content of what we do with DARE anymore. It's more about giving you guys the skills and being responsible and making good decisions like we were just talking about. But I think it is important. I think it is important for us to at least talk about drugs and discuss how they can affect us and impact us. Especially now that, again, we keep saying it, and we're going to keep saying it over and over again. As you guys are getting older and going on to that next phase, you may find yourself presented with things that you've never seen before, or you don't know what they are. So, Officer Brian, how would you define a drug, or what does drug mean to you?
Well, drug to me, Wes, is something that will alter your mind, change your mind, or change your feeling at all. So with that, there's good drugs and bad drugs. Officer Wes and I, are here, and we're going to explain to you the difference between those good and bad drugs. I know what you're saying is, well, sometimes the grown-ups in my life give me something to make me feel better. Yes, that is a drug. However, you're using it to the prescribed amount, and the grown-up is being responsible with that drug use. A bad drug, however, would you like to touch on that, or would you want to just have me keep going?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of just plain old just bad drugs out there. There's a whole long list that we could get into of some really bad stuff that's out there. And like as a police officers, we usually refer to those as like illegal or illicit substances. And again, that's not something that we want to touch a lot on today, because what you guys are going to be doing as sixth graders is you're actually going to be researching a lot of this as part of your health curriculum. And as part of that curriculum, you'll be doing projects and sharing with your fellow classmates. More importantly, you're going to be seeing more work from the partnership here. So you're going to see Officer Wes, Officer Brian maybe coming in and helping out with those classes and sharing our information. But also you're going to see like Mrs. McGarry, who you met before from TPOD, coming in. And TPOD is a really, really awesome resource to be able to share some information with you guys as well. But everything that you were just saying, Officer Brian, sounds to me kind of like you're talking about medicine.
Yes, absolutely.
So medicine, what do we think? Does it fall in that category of good or bad?
Well, to be honest, it could be both.
Both?
Yes, both, Wes. I know, it's scary.
You sure about that?
You kind of scared me there. Okay. But,
okay.
Well, yes, like Officer Wes said, medicine, and he asked me, is it a drug? Technically, yes, it is. But how I talked about earlier, it's a good drug when used correctly, okay? There's instructions on every label that's prescribed to you or the recipient of that medicine. And when your grown-up gives you that medicine and you use it to the prescribed amount, reading the directions, then yes, it is a good drug. However, when you start to not follow the directions and take more than you're supposed to, that's when that drug could turn bad.
It's all coming back to that safe and responsible decision making that we keep mentioning over and over again. Medicine is a powerful tool, and as long as we treat it with respect and we use it responsibly, it keeps that status of good drug, something that makes us happy, healthy, stronger, whatever the case might be. So again, but that all comes down to being able to use it the proper way. Another thing, the thing to consider is the fact that medicine usually has labels and instructions and all kinds of fancy science words on it that can tell us a little bit more about it and what it does. And more importantly, there's usually a doctor, somebody with a whole lot more education than probably either of us, combined, writing you a permission slip to say, hey, you should take this. I mean, that's usually a good clue, guys. That's a pretty good clue right there. However, there's some of that other stuff that's out there, these bad drugs. Now, there are bad, illegal, illicit drugs, but there are some drugs all around us in our daily lives that you may not think of, or you may not always consider a drug. That was our bell here, in case you were wondering. That's what the bell sounds like at Madison. But it's important to remember that two drugs that are all around us are alcohol and tobacco or nicotine. Now, these are things that you can literally buy in the store. You can go into the store and purchase them as long as you meet certain requirements. You have to be of a certain age. You have to have the proper identification. And there's a lot of rules and restrictions about what you can and can't do after using those drugs. Alcohol, you must be 21 years of age to purchase and to consume and to have in your possession. Now, tobacco products, nicotine products, it used to be 18. But actually, we're pretty lucky that here in the town of Trumbull, we were one of the first municipalities to adopt Tobacco 21, meaning you got to be 21 years of age to purchase it. And then the state went to the same restrictions. So you must be 21 with a valid ID to now be in possession of any tobacco product. Now, vaping is something that we hear a lot about too. I get a lot of questions about it. A lot of people are curious about it. Now, when it first came out, I know it was advertised to a lot of people as a way to say perfectly healthy, safe way to quit smoking. In all actuality, guys, it's just the new version of smoking. It's something that has kind of been morphed and now is chock full of pure nicotine. Nicotine being one of the top 5 most addictive substances on the planet to the human brain. And you guys, as kids, you have young developing brains and bodies. You respond differently to substances than grown-ups do because your body's not able to process it properly. So that's why being aware of this stuff and being able to identify it and know that, hey, maybe this isn't safe for me, or maybe this would be an irresponsible choice for me to choose to use it, is going to be very important. But that's where we come in. That's where we come in to try and help you guys navigate all this stuff.
All right, guys, Officer Brian here. The next segment, we're going to talk about risks. And Officer Wes here is going to explain maybe a risk that you might deal with on a daily basis.
So I think that the important thing to remember about a risk is that it's nothing more than just taking a chance. You know, we take risks in our daily lives every single day.
Like what kind of chance?
Well, you know, it could be something simple. It doesn't always have to be something as intense, maybe like we've been talking about, like with drugs, but it could be something simple with me taking a risk of not brushing my teeth.
What do you mean by that? What's wrong with that?
Well, if I take a chance not brushing my teeth, then what if I get like cavities?
Oh, I didn't think of that.
Yeah. So that's kind of the point we want to make here, is that a lot of times with the risks that we choose to take or not to take, we have what's called consequences, which I'm sure is a word that you guys are all very familiar with. And it's something that I heard a lot growing up, like I became very familiar with consequences. So, but consequences, guys, are what happen as a result of the things we choose to do or not to do. But they can be positive or negative, and it's not always bad. But for instance, if I take the risk of, you know, not brushing my teeth, then a negative consequence could definitely be that, hey, I might end up with some cavities or some fuzzy looking teeth coming to work in the morning, which is not what I want.
Get yelled at by your parents, get yelled at by your dentist.
Yeah,
I've been there. Wes has been there.
Yeah, not something that we want. But again, being able to identify the risks in your lives is very important as well. I said it before, we take risks every day in some shape or form, but it's important to be able to look at them and say, hey, what are my consequences going to be? What could potentially happen if I choose to do this or not to do this? This all goes back to the idea of good, solid decision-making skills. If you are able at a young age, as a 5th grader going into 6th grade, to be able to sit back and say, you know what, if I do this, this might happen. If I don't do this, this might happen. That's you building that sense of maturity and showing people that you can be responsible. And that's one of the biggest takeaways from today. I mean, we see it all the time. It's something that we want to be able to give people these skills and have this knowledge as early on as possible to basically make themselves safer and more responsible. All right, so from here, guys, this is going to conclude our first lesson. So this is our first lesson today that we're going over with you, and we're going to be wrapping it up now. But that doesn't mean we want the conversation to end. If anything, we want you guys to be able to continue having the conversation at home with the grown-ups in your life, because this is important stuff. You agree, Officer Brian?
Very important stuff.
Absolutely.
A lot of good information here.
But you guys got to be able to, don't just forget about it. Have that dialogue, have that conversation at home. Maybe bring up some questions that you may be unsure of yourselves. So to do that, we have some special guests. We're going to be inviting some Madison and Hillcrest students to give you guys what we call our conversation kickoffs. These will be questions that we would like you guys to have at home with the grown-ups in your lives between now and when we have our next lesson. So again, it's a way for you to keep that conversation going and also maybe ask some questions of the people in your lives that you never really felt comfortable about asking before or never really thought to ask. So, is that everything, Officer Brian? Did we cover it all?
You hit all the points, Wes.
I hope so. What do you want to do? You want to get out of here? Want to go get some chocolate milk?
Coffee, but
Coffee?
yeah, let's
All
go.
right, or chocolate milk. Anyways, guys, thanks for joining us today. It's so good to see all of you. Glad to see that we could finally get something like this up and working. We'll see you guys all in our next video series. Thank you. Let's be safe. Let's be responsible. We'll talk real soon. All right. Thank you.
Where does your family store medicine in your house, and how does your family keep it safe?
What are 3 things you can do to show you're responsible?
What are some of the risks you've taken, and have they had a negative or positive effect?